Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Beijing warns Taiwan's new president, Tsai Ing-wen, against seeking independence. China cautions that peace would be impossible if she makes any moves to formally break away. Remarks come just hours after Tsai's inauguration speech. Egyptian airliner carrying 66 people from Paris to Cairo crashes into the Mediterranean Sea. The cause of the crash unknown. Officials say plane likely to have brought down by terrorists. At least 63 killed and over 100 others missing in floods and landslides triggered by heavy rains in Sri Lanka. Over 500,000 people evacuated from their homes in the country's capital. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe appeals to the people to vacate the low-lying areas. And world number 3, Roger Federer, pulls out of the French Open due to back injury. 17-time major winner to miss his first Grand Slam since 1999. Our top focus on the program this week. Taiwan's first woman president, Tsai Ing-wen, urged China to drop the baggage of history. The largely conciliatory inauguration speech, however, failed to meet China's expectations. President Tsai avoided mentioning key phrases Beijing hoped to hear, a promise that she would abide by an understanding the two governments reached in 1992. The understanding, known as the 92 Consensus, holds that there is one China without defining what it means. Tsai's Democratic Progressive Party, which has traditionally favored independence, won parliamentary and presidential elections with a huge majority on the back of a rising tide of anger against China. Here's more.
Taiwan's first woman president, Tsai Ing-wen, urged China on Friday to drop the baggage of history. In a conciliatory inauguration speech, she said Taiwan will play a responsible role and be a staunch guardian of peace with China.
我始终相信，改革国家不是一个人或一个政党的事，改革国家是所有的人要团结起来，一起努力的事。
But the Chinese mainland's Taiwan Affairs Authority called the remarks an incomplete answer. In a statement, it said the new leader was ambiguous on the fundamental issue of the nature of cross-strait relations.
人民是国家的主人，所以典礼的舞台的正中央不是政府总统，也不是政府官员，而是不同的族群代表和艺术家的演出。
President Tsai was sworn in at a time when Taiwan's export-driven economy is stagnating. Tsai's Democratic Progressive Party, which has traditionally favored independence, won parliamentary and presidential elections by a landslide in January. One of the strongest reasons for her win was a voter backlash against creeping dependence on China. China has never renounced force to take control of any rebellious province. China is pressuring the new government to stick to the One China principle. It said this month that the new Taiwan government will be to blame for any crisis that might erupt. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is former Ambassador Ranjit Gupta. He's also been representative to Taiwan. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining me on the program. You know, the whole situation in Taiwan seems to have left the Chinese in a very jittery state at the moment, and they seem to be flustered with what's happening in Taiwan.
Well, I think China fully expected that she will be elected, and instead of reacting in any angry fashion, they should be pleased that they have in Tsai Ing-wen a pragmatist, not an ideologue. She's not a politician by profession. She joined the DPP only in 2004. She's extremely precise in the usage of her language. And given the DPP's constitution, charter and background, she has, in my considered opinion, and I think the world over, anybody who would consider who would carefully see the words that she has used, she has gone to the absolutely maximum extent that a DPP president could do without actually using the word one China principle. I mean, she has said, we arrived at various joint acknowledgements and understandings in the meeting in 1922. I respect this historical fact. She can't do more. So I think China's reaction, China has this habit of bullying all its neighbors all the time, and not merely its smaller neighbors, India also, which is a very large neighbor. So I think they are overreacting. And overreaction has consistently brought a backlash within China, from the within Taiwan, from the people of Taiwan.
You know, the Chinese are weary that now that the DPP is in power and Tsai is the president, that she might renew talks, or there could be talks of a formal independence of Taiwan. Now, is that going to happen? Is that something that Taiwan is weary of?
The question simply does not arise.
Why is that so?
As I said, because Tsai is not a politician. She's a pragmatist. She recognizes, Taiwan itself recognizes, the people of Taiwan, the support for independence would not be in even double-digit numbers, percentage. The support for reunification equally is less than double-digit percentage. Everybody in Taiwan wants the status quo to continue. And above all, President Tsai Ing-wen.
Indeed. You know, it's a very peculiar situation as far as Taiwan is concerned, because the government believes that it's an independent country, whereas China just calls it a rogue province. So, you know, what's the deal with Taiwan?
The reality is that Beijing has not ruled Taiwan since 1895. And after the World War II, when power was transferred from Japan, whose colony Taiwan was, to a self-governing status, it has never been ruled from Beijing since 1895. It was ruled from Taipei. It is a self-governing, unusual entity in international relations, one of its kind. But Beijing has to also accept the fact that it pays taxes, it elects its own people to its own government.
Indeed, indeed. You know, another thing is that Taiwan is extremely dependent on mainland China as far as the economy is concerned. Its trade is a lot with mainland China, and even as you rightly pointed out, the president and the people of Taiwan will want the status quo to continue because they are highly dependent on mainland China.
The reality is that you cannot run away from China in a political sense, but you cannot declare independence. On the other hand, in an economic thing, it is the two economies are conjoined. But in her speech, she herself said, we wish to bid farewell to our past over-reliance on a single market.
Yes, yes.
The investment is coming down. The trade is, of course, booming, but then Taiwan's trade, Taiwan is a very, very robust trading partner of a large number of countries in the world, of the United States, of ASEAN, and potentially India in terms of investment. Chinese firms want to move out, Taiwanese firms want to move out of China now. It is no longer competitive to manufacture there.
Indeed. All right, Ambassador, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Let's wait and see and watch how things pan out in Taiwan. Moving on now, of course, let's move on to the other big news of the week. An EgyptAir flight from Paris to Cairo with 66 people on board crashed early on Thursday, leaving no survivors. Debris of the flight has now been found off the coast of Alexandria, and latest reports suggest there were smoke alerts near the airliner cockpit. However, there are still no answers as to what caused the plane to go down in the Mediterranean Sea. The search for the black box has now been intensified. The investigation about its disappearance is still on Here's a detailed report.
Hours after the Egyptian airline flight MS-804 went off the radar, the Egyptian military says the debris and the passenger belongings from the missing plane have been found off the coast of Alexandria in the Mediterranean Sea. The search for the black box has now intensified.
أعلنت القوات المسلحة المصرية في أحدث بيان لها وصل إلينا منذ لحظات أنه في إطار الجهود المبذولة من عناصر البحث والإنقاذ للقوات المسلحة في البحث عن الطائرة المفقودة منذ الأمس، تمكنت الطائرات الحربية والقطع البحرية المصرية المشاركة صباح اليوم.
When it lost contact, it was at the entering to the Egyptian airspace. What we have identified so far, together with the Greek side, that it was 280 kilometers from the coast of Egypt.
A massive search operation was launched after the plane disappeared on Thursday without a distress signal from its crew. Greek, Egyptian, French and UK military units have joined the search operation. Egypt has not ruled out a terrorist angle, saying the attack was a more likely scenario than a technical failure. Both France and Egypt are investigating together the mystery of the plane disappearance.
Des hypothèses sont examinées, mais aucune n'est privilégiée, car nous n'avons absolument aucune indication sur les causes. D'ailleurs, nous recherchons des débris de l'avion. Vous avez vu que la France contribue avec l'Égypte, la Grèce et puis d'autres pays. Un avion est déjà sur place, un autre va venir.
Meanwhile, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has expressed his utmost sadness and regret at the crash. The new development has left the relatives of the passengers anxious.
مش اي حد اي معلومه خالص والله ما في اي حد معلومه خالص يعني مش اي معلومه حصلت ما حدش عنده معلومه هي دي الفكره.
احنا عرفنا دلوقتي من الاذاعه يعني ان هي يعني وجدوا الحطام يعني لقوا الحطام بتاع الطياره في ناحيه اليونان كده فربنا يعني عقبال ما يلاقوا حد كده يعني نقدر حتى نصلي عليهم ولا حاجه.
The flight, which was en route from Paris to Cairo, disappeared from the radar on Thursday morning over the Mediterranean Sea with 66 people on board. The tragedy raised fears of a repeat of the bombing of a Russian passenger jet over Egypt last October that killed 224 people. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come, we'll bring you an update on the devastating floods in Sri Lanka. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. News on the US presidential race now. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton eked out a narrow win in the Kentucky primary over Bernie Sanders, who kept his underdog campaign alive with a decisive win in Oregon. On the Republican side, Donald Trump moved closer to being declared the party nominee. Here's more.
The US Republican race may have just Donald Trump as the last man standing, but the Democratic race is very much alive, with Bernie Sanders claiming that he is in until the last ballot is cast. On Wednesday, Sanders supporters handed him a win in the Oregon primary, adding to his run of late victories over Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Clinton declared a victory in the Kentucky primary, but the race was too close to call.
That there are a lot of people out there, many of the pundits and politicians, they say Bernie Sanders should drop out. Well, let me be as clear as I can be. I agree with you. We are in till the last ballot is cast.
However, despite her loss in Oregon, Clinton remains on the path to secure her party's nomination. Apart from her pledged delegate lead of 280, she has an overwhelming advantage among superdelegates. She's only around 100 short of the magic number of 2,383 delegates needed to win the nomination. Despite the rancor between the two Democratic rivals ahead of the National Convention in Philadelphia this July, Clinton is gearing up to facing Trump and the general election contest.
Ask yourself, if you have a President of the United States who has put at the center of his campaign his rhetoric about Muslims, how much more difficult will something like that become? How do we put together a coalition to take out ISIS when members of that coalition are majority Muslim nations? So what Trump says about foreign policy is not just offensive, it's dangerous.
Meanwhile, Trump won Oregon's Republican primary, the next step on his now seemingly unstoppable journey towards the GOP nomination. With a win, he got 70 delegates out of the 1,237 he needs to formally claim the nomination. The next round of 8 primaries are slated for 7th of June, and Washington, D.C. will host the last primary on 14th of June. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Moving on now, the US and other world powers have said that they are ready to arm Libya's UN-backed unity government to help it fight the cell-style Islamic State group. Speaking in Vienna, US Secretary of State John Kerry said world powers would back Libya in seeking exemption from a UN arms embargo. Here are the details.
World powers are ready to consider demands from Libya's new unity government for exemptions from a UN arms embargo and equip its military to fight against the Islamic State and other militant groups. The joint decision announced by US Secretary of State John Kerry on Monday followed a meeting in Vienna which was attended by diplomats from more than 20 countries.
The international community will support the Presidency Council as it seeks exemption from the UN arms embargo to acquire those weapons and bullets needed to fight Daesh and other terrorist groups.
The United States, 4 other permanent UN Security Council members, and more than 15 other countries participating in talks on Libya said they are ready to respond to the Libyan government's requests for training and equipping government forces.
Stabilization is the key. With stabilization, we can fight terrorism, we can assure development to a country with rich potentialities, but with a strong humanitarian crisis now. We can tackle the migration issue. We can develop the resources of Libya.
Libyan Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj, whose United Nations-backed government is still being challenged by a rival government in the east, has been pushing for Western powers to ease an arms embargo.
طالبنا برفع الحظر على التسليح لدعم المؤسسة العسكرية والقيادة المشتركة لمكافحة داعش. طالبنا بدعم وتجهيز الحرس الرئاسي الذي شكلناه منذ أيام. الحرس الرئاسي هذا دوره واضح وفاعل سيكون في حماية الحكومة والمرافق الحيوية وهو ليس بديل عن الجيش والشرطة. اتفقنا على دعم خفر السواحل من أجل الحد من ظاهرة الهجرة غير الشرعية.
The North African country has been in chaos since NATO-backed forces overthrew longtime ruler Colonel Muammar Gaddafi in October 2011. The Islamic State now controls the Mediterranean port of Sirte and in recent weeks has gained territory in government-held areas. The militant group has launched a series of suicide bombings and attacks on oil facilities across the country. The challenges are now daunting for the new government. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, hopes of finding survivors trapped under mud due to landslides in Sri Lanka are fading fast. Rescue operations resumed on Saturday intermittently as continuous rains threatened with more landslides. Rescuers recovered 30 more bodies on Friday, taking the death toll to over 60. Authorities say there are few chances of anyone being found alive and the toll is only likely to increase. Hundreds of people are feared trapped under mud after week-long rains unleashed deadly landslides at several places. Days of torrential rains has forced over 500,000 people out of their homes in Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, India has sent naval ships and aircraft to Colombo with relief material and assured the neighbour of all help in dealing with the devastation. Well, much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of the other international news of the week in Globe Watch.
An Anti-terrorism court in Pakistan has ruled that LET operations commander Zakir Rahman Lakhvi and 6 others accused in the 2008 Mumbai attack case will be individually charged for the abetment to murder of each of the 166 people who died in the carnage. According to official reports, the court, however, did not allow cross-examination of the suspects in this regard. The prosecution had filed an application in the ATC in Islamabad some 2 months ago, requesting it to make amendments in the charges against the suspects in abetment to murder of each individual in the carnage. The Turkish parliament has approved a controversial bill that will strip MPs of their immunity from prosecution. Pro-Kurdish lawmakers say this is essentially a move to expel opposition members from parliament. The measure is seen as targeting the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party as well as the main opposition Republican People's Party. Turkey has led an offensive against the insurgent PKK, which is accused of being a terrorist group. European Union finance ministers are expected to agree next week to draw up a common list of tax havens and sanctions against them, according to a draft EU document. The move follows the recent Panama Papers leak. EU member states currently have their own blacklists, but these differ and countries are free to decide which measures to impose. Libyan military forces managed to recapture the city of Misrata from the Islamic State, reversing some of the gains the militant group had made earlier this month. 7 members of the armed forces were killed and 19 were wounded in the conflict, including 3 who died in a mine explosion as they took control of the checkpoint of Abu Ghraib. The military have yet to take full control of the area but will keep making progress to safeguard Abu Ghraib town from Islamic State. South Korean author Han Kang won the Man Booker International Prize for Fiction for her novel The Vegetarian. The unforgettably powerful novel deals with a woman's rejection of human brutality and giving up of eating meat. Kang beat writers including Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk and international bestseller Elena Ferrante to win the award. The novel was translated by Deborah Smith, a 28-year-old Briton who only began learning Korean when she was 21.
Let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action. Defending champion Sevilla destroyed Liverpool's long-lasting hope of ending their 11-year European drought after defeating them 3-1 in the Europa Cup final in Basel. Liverpool dominated the early stages of the game and went ahead through an excellent goal by Daniel Sturridge in the 35th minute. Sevilla's Kevin Gamero scored an equaliser in less than a minute after the start of the second half. Koke then scored a brace in a gap of 6 minutes to give Unai Emery's men a 3-1 victory. Leicester City manager Claudio Ranieri said that the newly crowned English Premier League champions were looking to bring in new players but no superstars. After winning the title for the first time in the club's 132-year history, the team and their Thai owners showed off the trophy to cheering fans on stage at an event in Bangkok, during which Ranieri said he was looking for players to reinforce his team. Roger Federer withdrew from the French Open on Thursday after failing to recover from a back injury, bringing to an end the 17-time major winner's run of 65 consecutive Grand Slams. The world number 3, who has been plagued by knee and back injuries this year, last missed a Grand Slam event in 1999 when he skipped the US Open. Stepping up its fight against widespread allegations of doping, the IOC has revealed that up to 31 athletes from 6 different sports have been tested positive in a reanalysis of their anti-doping samples from the 2008 Beijing Olympics. According to the Lausanne-based body's executive board, the results of 250 more retests from the 2012 London Olympics would also come shortly. These athletes are likely to face a ban from featuring at the upcoming Rio Games, as a decision on this matter will be taken on 17th June. West Indies have recalled off-spinner Sunil Narine and all-rounder Kieron Pollard in the ODI squad for the first 4 matches of the upcoming Tri-Nation Series, which features Australia and South Africa. Besides these 2 star batsmen, Carlos Brathwaite and Marnell Samuels have also been named in the 14-man squad. All-rounder Andre Russell, T20 skipper Darren Sammy, Dwayne Bravo and swashbuckling batsman Chris Gale have been dropped from the squad. And finally, the Olympic torch relay completed another week of its vibrant tour through Brazil. The torch was carried by Raoni Cerqueira of the indigenous Pataxo tribe, one of the largest groups of Brazil's 900,000-strong indigenous population. It was also welcomed by a group of performing capoeira, a mix between martial arts and dance created by Afro-Brazilians during the time of slavery. I'm going to leave you with visuals of the Olympic torch. See you again next time.